They say that screams could be heard for many miles. It is the summer of the year 1462. You are an Ottoman soldier serving in what is believed to be the most powerful army on earth. Your army has conquered Constantinople. It has brought down empires. Now it is marching toward a small principality called Wallachia to defeat a rebellious prince. Everyone expects that the campaign will take only weeks, perhaps even days. Then you smell something. It is the smell of death, rot, and something else that you cannot identify. The marching column slows down. The scouts stop moving ahead. When you walk around the hill that leads toward the capital city, you finally see it. Before we delve into these overlooked tales of endurance and pain, if you find yourself drawn to the hidden corners of history, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories like this. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I am always amazed that we can explore these ancient narratives together, no matter where we are in the world, united by our curiosity about the past. There is a forest, but the trees are not trees. They are human bodies. There are 20,000 human beings raised high on wooden stakes. They are arranged in perfect geometric rows that stretch farther than your eyes can see. Some bodies have been dead for weeks, swollen and darkened. Others are still moving, still breathing, still screaming in agony. Your sultan, the same ruler who conquered the Byzantine Empire, looks at this horrific sight and turns his entire army around immediately. What kind of mind is able to create such a scene? The most frightening thing is that this was not madness. It was a calculated strategy. It was cold, precise, and terrifyingly effective. The story that many people believe about Vlad the Impaler is not true. Not because the events themselves did not occur, but because the complete truth is far worse than the stories that survived. This is the full record of how one man used human suffering as a weapon so effectively that he changed the direction of empires. By the time you reach the end, you will understand that the real horror was not what he did to human bodies. The real horror was what he did to human minds. Let us ask a question that almost nobody asks. What kind of experience breaks a human being so completely that he becomes capable of doing something like this? The year is 1442. Vlad is 11 years old. His father, Vlad II Dracula, known as Vlad the Dragon, has just made a deal that will shape the future. It is not a symbolic or poetic deal. It is a real political agreement with Sultan Murad II of the Ottoman Empire. The agreement is simple. Vlad II will be allowed to keep his throne in Wallachia. In exchange, he must give his two youngest sons as hostages. They will serve as living guarantees of his loyalty. Young Vlad and his younger brother Radu are taken from their home and delivered into the center of the Ottoman world. They are not placed in dungeons. Instead, they are welcomed as guests in the palace at Edirne and later at Amasia. They receive expensive clothing, education, and military training. They learn Turkish, Arabic, philosophy, and the meanings of the Quran. On the surface, their life seems privileged, but history books often hide what was truly happening. This was not ordinary education. It was psychological warfare. Vlad spent the most important years of his development, from age 11 to age 17, watching his captors perfect the art of building an empire. He observed how the Ottomans used fear as a weapon of governance. He witnessed public executions designed not only to punish individuals but to terrify entire populations into obedience. He learned that terror, when applied with precision, was more effective than any army. And he learned one more thing. He had absolutely no power. While his younger brother Radu adapted, even becoming close to the Sultan's son Mehmed, Vlad refused to surrender to the system. According to Ottoman court records, Vlad was punished frequently for resisting authority. Some accounts claim that he was beaten and perhaps tortured. The full details are lost to history, but one thing is certain. Something inside him changed during those years. or perhaps something inside him became solid and impossible to break. He developed what modern psychology might describe as a deep belief that the world was constantly against him. At the same time, he developed an intense need for control. But he did not simply suffer. He studied. Each punishment he received became a lesson. Each torture he witnessed became a tool. He was creating a mental arsenal piece by piece. In the year 1448, after 6 years of captivity, Vlad finally returned to Wallachia. He was 17 years old. 2 months later, his father was assassinated by rival boyars, the noble families who constantly shifted their loyalty between the Ottomans and the Hungarians. His older brother Mircea was buried alive. Vlad was completely alone, surrounded by enemies and supported by nobody. This is where the story begins to change. Vlad did not simply want revenge. He wanted to reshape the world into the same form as the trauma he had lived through. He wanted to take everything he had witnessed under the Ottomans and refine it into something even more powerful. But he had to wait. For 6 years, Vlad lived in exile. He observed, planned, and studied military strategies and political manipulation. Finally, in the year 1456, with support from Hungary, he seized the Wallachian throne. A new figure had emerged, shaped by years of trauma and study. Vlad's coronation feast in 1456 should have been a joyful event. Instead, it became a model for everything he would later do. He invited the boyar families, the same nobles who had orchestrated his father's murder and had buried his brother alive. Hundreds of them arrived in their finest clothing, expecting to show their loyalty to the new prince. The hall was decorated with care. Wine was being served freely. In the middle of the feast, Vlad stood and asked a simple question. How many princes of Wallachia have you lived through? The older boyars proudly answered between 7 and 10. Some of them claimed to remember a dozen different rulers. They believed that they were showing their experience and their ability to survive political change. Vlad smiled. Then he gave an order. Every boyar who had answered that question was arrested. But he did not kill them right away. He divided them into 2 groups. The older boyars, the ones he believed were responsible for the deaths in his family, were impaled immediately outside the palace walls. The stakes were placed with great care to avoid killing them quickly. They died slowly over hours or even days. Their painful screams filled the air. The younger boyars and their families were stripped of their noble clothing and forced to march 50 miles north to the ruins of Poenary Castle. They were given a choice that was not really a choice. They could rebuild the fortress with their bare hands or they could die. For months they hauled stones up steep terrain. They worked until their hands bled and their expensive clothing turned to rags. Many of them collapsed and died. The ones who survived were changed forever. Vlad had removed the old nobility and replaced it with a new class of people who feared him completely and owed everything to him. This was not simply revenge. It was a careful destruction of the systems that had made Wallachia weak. It also revealed something important about Vlad's mind. He did not want simple obedience. He wanted people to be so broken that obedience became the only thing they could do. But this was only the beginning, and it was still only inside Wallachia. The next events would shake entire empires. After the destruction of the boyar families, Vlad had complete control over Wallachia. But control inside his land was not enough for him. He believed that fear was the strongest force in human society. He believed that a ruler must rule not through love or respect, but through terror that could be felt even before his soldiers arrived. So he created laws that were strict in a way that had never been seen before. If any man stole something, even something very small, the punishment was death by impalement. If a woman lied, or if a merchant cheated a customer, or if a soldier disobeyed an order, the punishment was the same. Soon the entire region was filled with stories of people who had been caught and punished. Many travelers wrote that in Vlad's Wallachia, A person could leave a bag of gold on the street and return days later to find it still there. There is a story that people often repeat, and it shows how Vlad used terror not only as punishment but also as an example. One day, Vlad ordered a large golden cup to be placed at the central fountain in the capital city of Targovist. He announced that any person could drink from the cup at any time, but anyone who tried to steal it would be executed. The golden cup remained in the open for years, untouched. People obeyed not because they respected the law, but because they feared the ruler who had created it. Vlad never allowed people to forget that he was capable of anything. He did not need constant violence. He needed the memory of violence. He needed people to imagine what he might do. But terror alone could not protect Wallachia. The greatest threat was still the Ottoman Empire, which was expanding rapidly under a new ruler. Mehmed II, the same prince who had trained with Vlad in their childhood years, had now become the Sultan, and he had achieved something that changed the world. He had conquered Constantinople in 1453. Mehmed was a young ruler, but he was ambitious, strategic, and extremely intelligent. His army was the most powerful in the world. His navy dominated the seas. His engineers built cannons that could destroy the walls of ancient cities. Vlad knew that if the Ottomans decided to invade Wallachia, he could not defeat them in a traditional battle. His army was too small. His resources were limited. His land was a narrow buffer between two powerful worlds. So he returned to the lessons of his youth. He understood that the Ottomans did not fear physical pain. They did not fear death. They believed that dying in battle was a holy act. But they feared something else. They feared chaos. They feared unpredictability. They feared a world where the rules of war no longer applied. Vlad began to create that world. In the year 1459, he refused to pay tribute to the Ottomans, breaking the agreement that previous Wallachian rulers had accepted. Mehmed sent emissaries to talk to Vlad, expecting a diplomatic apology. But Vlad had already decided that diplomacy was meaningless if he wanted to create fear. According to chroniclers from multiple nations, the Ottoman envoys arrived wearing traditional turbans. When they met Vlad, he ordered them to remove their head coverings as a sign of respect. The envoys refused, explaining that it was the custom of their religion to keep their turbans on. Vlad answered that he respected their custom. Then he ordered his soldiers to nail the turbans to the emissaries' skulls. He allowed the envoys to leave Wallachia with their turbans still nailed in place. This act alone would have been enough to start a war. But Vlad was not finished. He began a series of raids across the Danube River into Ottoman territory. His soldiers moved at night, burning villages, destroying supply lines, and killing entire garrisons. They did not spare anyone. Entire communities were erased. Vlad wanted the border region to become a landscape of fear. Ottoman survivors described something strange. They said that Vlad's soldiers would often leave one person alive in each village. That person would run to the next settlement and describe the horror that had happened. It was a psychological strategy that the Ottomans had used, but Vlad refined it. He wanted fear to travel faster than his army. He wanted rumors to do the work for him. Finally, Mehmed had enough. He ordered an army of more than 100,000 soldiers to march toward Wallachia and remove Vlad from the throne. It was one of the largest military forces assembled in the region. No one believed that Vlad could survive such an attack. But Vlad was preparing something that the Ottoman Empire had never seen. He knew that he could not win in open battle. So he focused on destroying the mind of the enemy instead of the body. In the winter of 1461 and the early months of 1462, Vlad planned what historians now call the night attack. He studied the Ottoman camp. He observed the movements of soldiers. He looked for weaknesses. He created detailed maps that showed exactly where the Sultan slept. Then one night, under complete darkness, Vlad's forces crossed into the enemy camp. They were dressed in Ottoman clothing. They shouted commands in the Turkish language. The confusion was total. Soldiers attacked their own allies, believing that Vlad's warriors were everywhere. Fire spread across the camp. Horses ran wild. Tents collapsed. Hundreds of Ottoman soldiers died in the chaos. Vlad's army almost reached the tent of the Sultan. If they had succeeded, they might have changed the entire history of Europe. But Mehmed escaped at the last moment. Even though the attack did not kill the Sultan, it achieved something else. Created fear. The Ottomans realized that Vlad was not fighting like a prince. He was fighting like a force of nature. But an even greater horror was waiting for them. Because after the night attack, the Ottoman army continued to advance toward the Wallachian capital. They expected a traditional battle. Instead, they found the place where the forest of 20,000 impaled bodies stood. They had entered the world that Vlad had created. When the Ottoman soldiers reached the outskirts of Targovist, they expected to see a battlefield, a defensive wall, or at least soldiers waiting to resist them. Instead, they saw something that froze their bodies in place. Some soldiers said that the air became heavier. Others said that even the horses refused to walk forward. Before them was a valley filled with impaled human bodies. There were 20,000 stakes rising from the ground. Some were tall, some were short, and all were arranged in perfect rows that stretched across the land like a dark and terrible pattern. It did not look like something created by random violence. It looked like something that had been designed with intelligence and purpose. The bodies were in many different stages of decay. Some had swollen from weeks of exposure. Others had dried in the sun. A few were still alive, breathing slowly, trapped between life and death. The silence of the Ottoman army was broken only by the soft sound of wind moving through the stakes and the distant moaning of the dying. Chroniclers who were present wrote that even the Sultan looked shaken. He had conquered the greatest city on earth. He had fought battles across continents, but he had never seen anything like this. The purpose of the display became clear. Vlad had not created the forest of bodies to kill 20,000 people. He had created it to attack the thoughts of the living. One Ottoman chronicler wrote that the Sultan looked at the sight for a long time and then said that a man who could create such a thing could not be defeated by ordinary means. It is said that he turned his entire army around after seeing the forest of the impaled. The sight had achieved what weapons could not. It had broken the will of one of the most powerful armies in the world. But the story did not end with this moment. The Ottomans did not give up entirely. They replaced their fear with determination. They supported Vlad's younger brother, Radu, who had grown up in the Ottoman court and was loyal to Mehmed. Wallachian nobles, tired of Vlad's strict rule, began to secretly support Radu as well. Vlad's control over his own land began to weaken. He had relied entirely on fear. Fear had worked against foreign invaders, but fear also created resentment among his own people. Many Wallachians believed that they would be safer under a ruler who followed normal political customs. Vlad understood that he could not remain on the throne without support. He had created obedience through terror, but he had not created loyalty. As Ottoman forces returned with stronger internal support from Wallachia, Vlad retreated into the mountains. Eventually, he was forced to flee to Transylvania, seeking help from the Hungarian ruler Matthias Corvinus. But instead of receiving assistance, he was arrested. For more than 10 years, he was held prisoner in Hungary. Even in captivity, Vlad's reputation continued to grow. Travelers spoke of him as a protector of Christianity. Others described him as a demon in human form. Some said that he performed acts of heroism. Others said that he ate meals while watching people die on stakes. Many of these stories were propaganda created by his enemies. Many were exaggerated, but exaggeration was unnecessary because the truth was already horrifying enough. During his imprisonment, his younger brother Radu ruled Wallachia with Ottoman support. Radu was more diplomatic and gentle in nature. He was loved by the boyars and accepted by most of the population. But he died unexpectedly in 1475. The sudden power vacuum created an opportunity for Vlad. After long negotiations, Vlad was released from captivity and supported by Hungarian forces to reclaim the throne. Once again, he marched into Wallachia. Once again, the people saw the same intense and strict ruler return. For a short time, he held power again. But this final reign lasted only a few months. His enemies inside Wallachia and the invading Ottoman forces were stronger than before. In the winter of 1476, Vlad marched into battle against an Ottoman-backed army. The details of his death remain unclear. Some historians believe that he was killed by Ottoman soldiers. Others believe that he mistakenly killed by his own men in the chaos of the battle. According to one account, his head was cut off and taken to the Sultan as proof of his death. The Sultan ordered that the head be displayed on a stake in Constantinople. What remains certain is that Vlad the Impaler died as violently as he had lived. But his influence did not disappear. His brutality was so extreme that his name continued to spread across Europe for centuries. Sailors told stories of him in distant ports. Merchants carried his legend across the continents. Scholars whether he was a hero or a monster. Eventually, his reputation reached a writer named Bram Stoker, who transformed the memory of Vlad into a fictional character that the world would come to know as Count Dracula. But the reality of Vlad was far more complex than the myth. He was a man shaped by trauma, captivity, betrayal, and war. He believed that the only way to survive was to control every part of the world around him. He turned human suffering into a political tool. He understood the psychology of fear better than most rulers in history. The forest of the impaled was not created by madness. It was created by a mind that had learned that fear travels faster than armies, lasts longer than battles, and transforms ordinary men into legends and terrors. The lesson of Vlad's life is not about cruelty alone. It is about the destructive power of a mind that has decided that fear is the only truth. When a ruler believes that terror is the best way to rule, the world around him becomes a mirror of his trauma. People become instruments, suffering becomes strategy, and the boundaries between justice, revenge, and horror disappear. This is why the story of Vlad the Impaler continues to survive. It is not merely a tale of violence. It is a reminder of what a human being becomes when the only lesson he has learned from the world is pain.